Welcome to Dark Notes. In 1867, a boy walked into a Missouri town with the eyes of a corpse and the manners of a saint, and by the time he left, 3 were dead, and nothing human remained in the hearts of those who survived him. His name was Timothy Caldwell, and what he brought wasn't murder, it was something older, something far colder. Every once in a generation there's a child who doesn't fit, not because he's slow, not because he's wild, but because he's too precise, too perfect, too aware. In Timothy Caldwell's case, the perfection wasn't in his smile or his handwriting, it was in how people died around him, quietly, painlessly, undeniably. He was only 8 when he arrived at the Caldwell farm, nestled in the rot-soft soil of postbellum Missouri. America was still bleeding, its wounds barely scabbed over from Civil War, and Timothy walked in like he had nothing to forget. No scars, no story, but evil, true evil, never wears a costume. It arrives in silence, and Timothy Caldwell was born silent. His uncle said he needed help on the farm. That's what he told the town. Boy's seen enough loss, Thomas Caldwell muttered into his whiskey. He just needs a steady hand and hard work. But within weeks, animals began dying quietly, without struggle, with precision that suggested knowledge no child should have. And the townsfolk, they looked away, because Timothy never lied. He looked men dead in the eye and spoke like a soldier, like someone who knew the weight of bones and blood. Dr. Samuel Harding, the only physician for miles, said it best. That boy made me feel like I was the one being diagnosed. But this isn't just a story of a disturbed child. But would be too easy. No, Timothy Caldwell wasn't broken, he was exact. He was studying us. The first death, little Mary Fletcher, was found in barely knee-deep water, drowned. Timothy was the one who found her, told her mother calmly, helped carry the body. But Dr. Harding saw the details in Timothy's account are perfect, too forensic, like he was observing, not grieving. People die all the time, especially back then, but they don't die like this. They don't die where children find them, unless someone wants them found. Then came Henrik Len, neck broken at Devil's Bluff, 40 feet to the rocks. Timothy said he saw his hat, thought something was wrong, went down to check, found him. But here's where it begins to break. There were bees, dozens of bees clustered around the corpse, but the hives above were undisturbed. Clean, active. A veteran beekeeper doesn't fall because of bees, and bees don't gather where they shouldn't, unless they're placed, unless something about the boy pulled them there. The third death shattered the town's comfort. Jacob Mills, 6 years old, disappeared for 4 days, found barely alive. In an old well, Timothy discovered. By the time Dr. Harding got there, the boy was breathing dust and coughing blood. Died within hours. Harding watched Timothy from the shadows, watched him watch the boy die. No tears, no panic, just observation. Cold, clinical observation. And this is where you start to understand Timothy wasn't a psychopath. He was something older than that, something without a name. The term hadn't been invented, the science didn't exist. But evil, true evil, doesn't need science to survive, it only needs silence. That well, the brush had been moved, the entrance hidden, precisely. It wasn't an accident, it was a cage. And the boy, he knew it would take 3 days for Jacob to die, long enough to search, short enough to silence. After that, the deaths slowed, but the sickness began, not in people, in animals. Chickens found with broken necks, pigs wasting away with strange wounds, calves dying from inexplicable strangulation, all within walking distance of Timothy's home, all following the same unnatural pattern. Efficient death, clean, controlled, no blood, no mess. The neighbors whispered, but no one accused, because Timothy never slipped, never got angry, never told stories, and always had an explanation. I was looking for a calf. I thought I heard something. I just wanted to help, and it worked. Until it didn't. Single quotes. Dr. Harding kept records, filled 3 journals, with notes, sketches, diagrams, described Timothy as an observer, not a participant in life, a child who processed trauma like a physician, not a victim. And in one chilling entry, he wrote, "If this child is human, he is human, in a way we do not yet understand. If he is not, then I have looked directly into the eyes of something that wears the human face, but is not bound by its limits." That's where we begin to cross the line from history into something else. Because in the winter of 1866, things got worse. The dreams started. Nightmares that infected not just the Caldwells, but the neighbors too. The town preacher's wife saw Timothy standing in her parlor at 2 a.m., but the boy was asleep in his bed. Or so they said. Old man Wickham claimed he heard whispering outside. His window every night for 2 weeks, whispering that stopped only when he nailed shut the shutters and placed his late wife's Bible on the sill. And then came the fire. It started in the Patterson barn. No lightning, no spark, just a sudden roar like the building had been soaked in something unnatural. 11 cows, gone, charred black bones by morning. Timothy watched from the fence line, and he smiled. Just once. Dr. Harding saw it. He never told the others, just wrote it down. That same journal page contained one line underlined 3 times. I believe the child is conducting experiments. Let that settle. For a moment, not killing for rage, not for pleasure, for data. And suddenly everything changes. You're not dealing with a killer. You're dealing with a system, a program in a boy's body. Testing reactions, measuring outcomes, studying fear. The second half of this descent will strip away the idea of innocence forever. But before we go deeper, before we show you what Timothy did next, I want you to comment this phrase below to anchor the transformation in your identity, and to let the algorithm know you're awake. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Say it twice, because you can't unknow what comes next. The next sections will tear through the veil between the human and the unthinkable. You've already stepped into the dark. Now we go further. There's a reason you were never meant to hear this story. It's not because of the deaths that happens in every age. It's because of what those deaths revealed. Because if a child can be born without empathy, without conscience, without that sacred flicker of humanity, then what else walks among us, wearing our faces? Timothy Caldwell was not forgotten because people were scared. He was forgotten because remembering him meant acknowledging something unbearable, that innocence is not a guarantee of goodness, that evil isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's curious. Sometimes it studies you. Sometimes it comes with a yes sir and a steady gaze that makes even grown men feel small. By November 1866, Dr. Samuel Harding had become obsessed, not just with the child, but with the pattern. He began drawing maps, pinning deaths, logging sightings, creating a web that all spun outward from one fixed center, the Caldwell farm. But the lines weren't random. They had shape, geometry, a structure so precise that it began to feel ritualistic. 3 deaths, then a lull, then 3 livestock mutilations, then a fire, then dreams, then silence. Harding began to suspect that something was being tested, a sequence, a rhythm, not chaos but control, as though Timothy was not just witnessing misfortune, but orchestrating it. He began interviewing neighbors under the guise of routine health visits. What he gathered only deepened the horror. A young girl, Martha Boone, age 9, said she saw Timothy standing in her family's field at dusk, staring at their scarecrow, just standing, not moving, for over an hour. When her father approached him, Timothy turned and walked away without a word. That same night, their scarecrow was found torn down, the straw arranged in a perfect spiral at the base of the pole. No footprints, no wind. A farmer named Elias Trenham reported that his cows refused to drink from the southern stream after Timothy had been seen playing nearby. They clustered near the barn instead, lowing in distress. When Trenham followed the stream, he found dozens of frogs dead, bloated, their eyes missing, and above them a crude symbol carved into a tree, a symbol he didn't recognize. But Dr. Harding did. It matched one found at the base of Devil's Bluff, scratched into stone, nearly eroded by time. A symbol not taught in Missouri schools, not used by farmers, but something far older. Harding cross-referenced it in a book of occult glyphs illicitly obtained from a former seminary student turned drunkard. The symbol represented observation, not seeing, not watching, but recording. Let that sink in. What kind of child scratches the sigil for observation near the site of a death? By now, Harding had stopped thinking of Timothy as a boy. The language in his journals shifted. He stopped using pronouns, began referring to the child as the subject, the entity, the vessel. One night, Harding camped in the woods near the Caldwell farm. He didn't sleep, he didn't move, he simply watched. At 2:17 a.m., he saw a light in the woods, a single candle flame moving slowly between the trees. It stopped. Then another appeared, and another, for flames standing in a perfect square, and in the center, a small shape kneeling still. Timothy. He wasn't holding a candle, he wasn't praying, he was listening. Harding would later write that the silence was so total, he could hear his own blood in his ears. The air felt thick, charged not with electricity, but with something older, a kind of presence that doesn't come from the sky or earth, but from between them. The lights vanished simultaneously. Timothy stood, turned toward Harding's hiding place, and smiled. Not a grin, not malice. Recognition. As if to say, you see me now. Harding fled. He ran through the woods like a man hunted not by claws or blades, but by understanding, because once you know what you're looking at, you can't pretend it's just a child. And here's where the story fractures into something darker, because Harding, in his desperation, contacted someone outside of Sedalia, a man named Albert Marchand, excommunicated priest from New Orleans who'd been rumored to have dealt with cases the church couldn't explain, possessions that didn't respond to Latin, incidents the Vatican had sealed. Harding sent his journals, begged for help. March responded with a single telegram: "That is not a child. Burn everything." No explanation, no advice, just that. Burn everything. But Harding couldn't, not yet, because he wanted to see. The next event confirmed what he feared and made him wish he'd obeyed. Sarah Caldwell Timothy's aunt was found in her bed, mouth open, eyes wide, blood pooled under her ears. No wound, no trauma, just death. The coroner couldn't find a cause. She looked frozen in mid-scream. Timothy claimed he found her like that she hadn't felt well, that he brought her water. No one saw him that night. No one could place him. But her pillow was dry, and her fingers were clenched not around sheets, but around hair. Blonde hair. Harding examined her brain during autopsy. There was no bleeding, no aneurysm, but the eardrums had ruptured, as if she'd heard something so loud, so unnatural, that it shattered her from within. And Timothy, he sat in the kitchen eating porridge. Calm, quiet, polite. He asked Harding if death was painful when it came all at once. He asked if souls weighed anything. Harding began to plan his departure, but before he could leave, he found something he couldn't ignore: a ledger, hidden in Thomas Caldwell's desk. It listed dates, names, weights. Some entries had notes: body still warm, heart strong, eyes open, watching. Subject did not respond to flame. Try the stream next time. The final entry read: "He learns faster than we did." Harding's hands shook as he read it, because it wasn't Thomas's handwriting, but it matched Timothy's. Perfect cursive, 8 years old, writing like a trained archivist. The doctor closed the book and never spoke of it again. He left town 3 days later, but he never escaped. His journals stopped abruptly 2 months later. The last sentence reads: "If it spreads, if he teaches others, we will not know until it's too late." Here's the part you were never meant to know. Timothy Caldwell was not buried. There's no death record, no grave. No obituary. He simply vanished from Sedalia history. But 17 years later, in a mining town in Wyoming, a new school opened, and its first student, an 8-year-old orphan with blonde hair and pale blue eyes, adopted by a childless couple. His name: Timothy Harding. No one questioned it, because the boy was polite, because he said, "Yes, sir," because he never complained. But the school nurse said he never blinked. And the birds wouldn't land on the windowsill of his classroom. Do you understand now? This is not just a story. It's a blueprint. It's a cycle. And somewhere out there, it's happening again. Comment it again now to lock it in. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide, because the descent has no bottom. And we are only halfway down. Halfway down. They buried the files, burned the letters, changed the census. But patterns leave scars, subtle wounds across time, across generations. You can erase a name, you can torch a house, you can even silence the witnesses, but you cannot unwrite the shape of evil, not when it moves in spirals. In 1884, nearly 2 decades after Dr. Harding's disappearance, a former U.S. Marshal named Edwin Lowry began collecting anomalous case notes for the Department of Interior. Unofficial work, quiet, off the books, things that made other men resign without explanation. Lowry was not a believer in the supernatural. He believed in patterns, cause and effect, blood and motive. But what he found in his final file is what broke him. It was a report from a Wyoming mining town. A child had vanished. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. His name was Caleb Murney, age 7, blonde, blue eyes. Last seen speaking with an older boy outside the schoolhouse. That older boy's name, Timothy Harding. But this wasn't just a name. It was a replica. The handwriting, the posture, the calm cadence in his voice. The schoolmaster described him as eerily precise. The doctor said, "His temperature runs low." And the town preacher swore after speaking with the boy for 30 minutes he had a dream that night of kneeling before something vast, with too many eyes. Lowry, desperate for clarity, rode into the town himself. He found the schoolhouse locked, the boy gone, but inside the teacher's ledger, written in red pencil, was a final roll call. Every child present, except one, and next to the blank space, a symbol. Not a name. The same symbol Dr. Harding had documented near the frogs. The sigil for observation. The The local sheriff dismissed it all as superstition. Just a drawing, just kids. But the next week, the schoolhouse burned down in a fire with no clear origin, and in the ashes, carved into the blackened doorframe, a phrase in Latin, venit videre dicere, he came to see, or career came to learn. Lowry sent a final telegram to Washington before he, too, disappeared. It's not demonic, it's worse. It remembers. So now ask yourself, how many Timothys have there been? Children who appear in a census with no parents. Children who speak like scholars. Children who never blink. Children who move towns after something happens. You think the system failed them? No, the system was built to forget them. From the beginning, you know those orphan trains that ran from New York to the Midwest between 1854 and 1929, the ones that relocated over 200,000 children. What if that wasn't mercy? What if it was containment? What if the real purpose wasn't to rescue the lost, but to scatter the unnatural? There are records and published ones of entire towns refusing to take certain children off the trains. Children described as quiet, but wrong. Children who didn't play. Children who didn't sleep. Children who didn't age. The files were sealed. The agents reassigned. And no one asked where those children went next, but one phrase recurs. In handwritten margins appears as before. Observes, waits, because that's what it does. It watches, it mimics, it learns, not because it's lost, but because it's preparing. So here is the truth. There was never just one Timothy Caldwell. There is a lineage not of blood, but of design, a replication, a continuation, the same spirit or mind or force wearing new skin each time, and every time it returns it arrives younger, smarter, more convincing, more human. And if you think it's gone, ask yourself, why do we keep finding children where there should be none? Why do some speak languages they were never taught? Why do some children, in the dead of night, draw diagrams older than writing? You want to know why Timothy was dangerous? Not because he killed, because he understood something we didn't, because he didn't fear the unknown. He was the unknown. Now it's not just about watching anymore, it's about becoming. So if you're still with me, repeat the phrase again, because this story needs anchors in memory to keep it from vanishing like it did before. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because if we don't speak it aloud, it finds silence. And silence is where it grows. By 1891, the department had gone quiet. No follow-up, no retrieval, no investigation. Edwin Lowry's telegram, the one where he warned it remembers, was classified within hours and buried. But inside a New Hampshire asylum called Davenport Hollow, a nurse named Helen Whitcomb kept a secret journal. She worked the night shift. She saw what they didn't. There was a boy admitted in November that year, name redacted, no family, age listed as 8, but he spoke fluent Latin, understood anatomical charts, and would not eat anything unless it was served on white porcelain. He wasn't violent, he wasn't feral, but he was waiting. Helen described him as the kind of child who watches you like he's grading you. He never smiled. He never asked for anyone. But once, when a nun entered his room holding a candle, he whispered something under his breath. You're the 6th one. The last 3 burned. They dismissed it as trauma-induced delusion. But 2 nights later, the nun's body was found in the chapel, throat torn, no blood, and on the wall, drawn in ash, that same symbol, observation. The boy, untouched, sleeping heat, stayed another 7 weeks, no visitors, no medical changes. But Helen noticed something chilling. He was learning the schedules, the weaknesses, the fears of every staff member. He'd ask just the right questions, wait for just the right silence. And then, on January 3rd, he was gone. No broken window, no unlocked doors, just vanished. But in his bed, a crude drawing done in red ink of Lowry, standing beside what appeared to be a long, black shape with many limbs, and the label, still watching. Now here's what they'll never print in textbooks. There were 12 other children admitted across New England that same month, all with similar names, similar temperaments, similar gifts, all vanished. Every single file was sealed under Executive Order 331B, a directive used only 4 times in U.S. history. And what's more disturbing, each of those files had a handwritten phrase added in a different ink. This is not one child, this is one will. What does that mean? It means we were never dealing with a boy. We were dealing with something ancient, strategic, and incomplete. Something that uses children not as vessels, not as victims, but as entry points. It arrives when the human mind is still forming, still malleable, still able to be rewritten without resistance. And now you understand why the foster systems have always been broken because they weren't designed to protect children. They were designed to contain what looks like them. Why do you think records go missing? Why do you think children get shuffled across state lines, renamed, and forgotten? Because something is riding the system like a wave, and wherever it goes, it studies, it feeds, it improves. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how many foster kids do you know who vanished without a trace? How many reports lists ran away when there was no warning, no planning, no signs? And how many came back, different, quieter, colder, less curious, but more calculated? Helen Whitcomb retired in 1903. She left the asylum, moved to Maine, and before she died, she mailed one final entry to a private archivist in Massachusetts. The last line read, "It is not a boy. It is a memory that walks, and one day, it will not return to observe. It will return to replace." You want to know the real horror? It doesn't want to destroy us. It wants to wear us better than we wear ourselves. Now say the words again. This time, out loud. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because this thing thrives on forgetfulness, and every word spoken against it is a fracture in its mask. They call it coincidence. They call it trauma. They call it folklore. But patterns that repeat themselves over centuries are not accidents. They are rituals. By 1908, something changed. Not in the creature, in us. The government didn't just seal files anymore. They began building institutions, places not to heal, but to isolate. You've heard of them: Cranbrook Facility, St. Elora's House, Maple Ash Grounds, and Facility for 2D in Missouri. What they all had in common: they didn't treat patients, they observed them, and the kind of patients they took in, children alone, found walking highways, found naked in winter, found staring at barns, or worse, found just standing still, in the middle of the road, unmoving, for hours. Each had no prior documentation. Each said the same thing when asked their name: I was Timothy, not my name is, not I am, but I was. The implications of that phrase terrified Dr. Florence Yule, one of the last true independent psychiatrists of her time. She tried to map the language patterns from these children. She noticed three things. Their pronouns fluctuated. I became we without notice. They never asked questions, only answered them. They often referenced events that had not happened yet. One child claimed, "The hospital on 9th will sink before the next spring." He already saw it, and it did. Flooded, collapsed, dozens dead. And no one could identify except Florence. She found a thread buried deep in one of her older case files from 1873. A patient named Darian, then aged 9, claimed he was watching through him now, and when asked who him was, he drew a face, blank eyes, number, mouth, and a symbol for observation not on the forehead, but etched into the pupil. Florence had it all sent to Washington. She never got a reply, but 2 weeks later her home caught fire. They said it was the furnace, except her furnace had been professionally removed the month prior, and on the walls of the burnt foundation, finger marks, hundreds of them, tiny, small, child-sized, pressed from the inside out. Do you understand yet? This isn't just one child. This is an intelligence, one that fractures itself across multiple bodies, each body unaware of the others until triggered, until proximity, until memory. That's why the sightings increase around train stations, orphanage reunions, abandoned foster files, because once one part gets close to another, it remembers more, and when they fully converge, they stop being children. They become a whole, a singular will, a mimicry perfected. And then it doesn't observe anymore. It moves. Ask any quiet corner of your history. Ask it why so many unsolved disappearances revolve around small towns, boarding schools, or failed adoptions between 1890 and 1935. Why those files are always missing the photo. Why the birth certificates were typed, not handwritten. Why the missing children were often described as too polite, too calm, too empty. Florence Yule's final notation, found in a second copy she had buried in her garden. It no longer knocks. It asks to be let in. And worse, sometimes we say yes. So I ask you now, when was the last time you saw a child watching you too closely, not scared, not sad, just watching, like they knew what you were about to say, like they were already bored of it? Say the words again. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because if you don't, it will take your silence as permission. By 1912 they tried something drastic. They stopped studying it. They tried to erase it. A project known only in handwritten memos as Operation Knoll Wake. The objective, to isolate every known child tied to the pattern. and remove all sensory stimuli for a sustained period of 18 months. No language, no mirrors, no books, no touch, no taste, just nourishment, sedation, and observation. 20-4 children, each selected from separate orphanages, each one found in the same position during intake, standing in the corner, facing the wall, hands behind the back. No one taught them that. No trauma led to that posture. It was intentional, because that's how the original one was found back in 1847 when a prospector found a boy in the ruins of an abandoned church, surrounded by corpses that had no visible wounds, just empty. The operation began inside Bell Rock Sanitarium, a forgotten granite complex built into the mountains of western Pennsylvania, funded in secret by an untraceable government entity labeled Department of Unanswered Phenomena. The lead psychiatrist was Dr. Hubert Malkin, a man so meticulous that he had staff practice silence drills every morning. No speech, no motion, no noise for up to 7 minutes straight. He knew that sound wasn't just a human trait, it was a trigger. For 72 days, there was no incident. Then came night 73. One of the girls, subject 09, bit her tongue off, voluntarily, didn't scream, didn't cry. She sat there as blood poured down her chin, and when the nurses entered, she smiled. Wrote a phrase on the wall in her own blood: "We were never the passengers." After that, the behavior spread. Subject 02 began mimicking the voices of staff who hadn't spoken aloud. Subject 14 refused to blink. Caver. Subject 21 levitated 3 inches from the floor when left alone for more than 6 minutes. And Subject 05, formerly unresponsive, woke up speaking fluent Aramaic, Greek, and something that linguists couldn't place. They called it structurally precise gibberish. But it wasn't gibberish, that it was instructions. Dr. Malkin wrote one final entry in his notes, now recovered only as a scorched page found in the rubble. It cannot be starved, it cannot be muted, it remembers itself into being, and when you take its name away, it simply waits for another child to give it a new one. On day 121, the entire west wing of Bell Rock lost power. All 24 children vanished, no broken locks, no footprints, no evidence of extraction, but every observer left alive that night. All 7 reported the same final memory, a humming sound, low, constant, and the distant whisper of a new name being spoken simultaneously in 12 voices. That name has never been released to the public. But what followed? Within 18 months, a series of 19 unrelated children across the US and Europe were found in the exact posture as those taken by Operation Null Wake. Each of their parents died under unusual psychiatric collapse. Each child tested negative for any known biological markers. Each one drew the observation symbol before ever being shown it. Now listen carefully. We are not dealing with hauntings, not possessions, not demons, not curses. We are dealing with a pattern that wears flesh, and it does not have a name because names contain, it prefers multiplicity. That is why it enters through children, because children are permissionless. They haven't signed the contract of reason yet. They don't ask what is real, they just accept what comes. So when a child tells you about the friend in the wall, the humming under the floor, the name they were given in the dream, you listen, because it's not a warning. It's an introduction. Say it with me. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because the more of us who remember, the harder it becomes for it to reassemble unnoticed. Let me tell you something they never put in the textbooks. Something no curriculum, no government white paper, no post-war psychiatric archive has dared to admit. There was a second Bell Rock, not a sanitarium, a school, hidden in plain sight, in the outskirts of Vermont, under the name the Elms Learning Institute for the Unassimilated Child, officially founded in 1924, privately funded, no alumni records, no photographs, just a dozen newspaper mentions, mostly about generous donations and mysterious research-based pedagogy. But the Elms wasn't built to teach. It was built to contain. According to classified testimony from a whistleblower in 1978, tonally known as KS, and leaked once through an untraceable CB radio signal, the children who arrived at Elms were handpicked, not based on aptitude, not on behavior, but on birth order. All of them were firstborn children delivered during solar eclipses, whose birth records showed a 2-minute delay in cry reflex. Now, that may sound meaningless, but according to Dr. Evelyn Carr, one of the few linguists hired by the Elms under the guise of verbal development consultant, the delayed cry indicated something far more chilling. It's not that the child wasn't breathing, it's that something else was waiting to speak first. She later referred to it as issue phenomena, when the child's first word matches a sentence spoken near them, hours or days prior, in a language they were never taught. One child, Aaron B., was only 9 months old when he spoke the phrase, "Return me to the vessel. She's not awake yet." Another, Lucia V., began writing numbers on the floorboards in patterns later confirmed to match pre-Euclidean star charts, charts that were only decrypted decades later using AI-assisted cosmological modeling. And here's the thing no one likes to hear. It wasn't just the children changing, it was the staff. Teachers at the Elms reported intrusive thoughts, phantom voices, the sense of being watched not from the halls, but from beneath the floors. The basement was sealed off in 1931, no reason given, but afterward, janitorial logs show a strange routine. Buckets of salt water poured down the main stairwell every third night. Some believed it was superstition. Others said it was containment, but one janitor, Kenneth M., quit the same year, left a note inside his locker scratched into the metal. It's not in the children, it's in the pattern, and the pattern is teaching us now. By 1940, the Elms shut down quietly. Official cause, declining enrollment. Unofficially, the last known message transmitted from the site was a private telegram intercepted by amateur radio archivists for mirrors now broken. The twins no longer speak in turn. We fear the vessel is waking. The building was bulldozed in 1952, yet no developer has ever built on the land. Every time construction was approved, something happened: missing equipment, disoriented workers, animals refusing to enter the property, even the birds fly around it. And if you go there today, if you stand at the edge of the overgrown field where the Elms once stood, you'll hear something beneath the soil, a low hum, like breath, like waiting. And if you press your ear to the ground, you'll hear a voice you've never heard before but that feels horribly familiar whisper, "I remember you." You still think this is a story. Still think you're safe because you don't believe in these things. Belief is irrelevant. This is structure. This is repetition. This is the hidden scaffolding behind entire regions of American history. And this is why the files were burned. Say it with me. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because the ones who don't say it, they get remembered the wrong way. You ever wonder why some families vanish from history entirely? Not just forgotten but erased. No census, no grave markers, no inheritance, records, just silence. Let me tell you about the Lampland family of Ashcroft, Maine. Once among the wealthiest merchant dynasties in the region, sailing routes from Boston to Barbados until 1899. Gone. No survivors, no legal transfer of property, and no official record of death. But what remained hidden in the town archives was one object, a ledger, bound in black leather, too large for any shelf, not filled with financial records. No, this ledger contained a single repeated sentence, handwritten across 319 pages. The house is learning us. Different ink, different hands, but the same exact phrasing. Every time investigators from the Ashcroft Historical Society opened the house in 1901, they never made it past the foyer. Why? Because every photograph taken inside showed visible to the eye, but printed clearly in the images. Figures wearing 18th century clothing, standing in the corners, hands behind their backs, eyes blacked out. They sent in a phonograph recorder, state-of-the-art technology for the time set to record ambient sound in the Great Hall. What it captured still lives in a vault, because at exactly 3:17 a.m., for 4 minutes and 12 seconds, the house spoke. I never needed the family. I only needed their echo. The lead archivist, Helena Rowe, suffered a mental breakdown within days. In her final lucid interview, she wrote a single sentence over and over in her case file margin. Some structures do not house people. Some structures are the people wearing walls like skin. After that, Ashcroft sealed the estate, declared the land seismically unstable, but they lied. There was no seismic activity, no fault line, no natural explanation. And here's the kicker. In 1982, a team of real estate developers tried to purchase the land. They all died within 7 days of signing the interest contract. Each one choked to death in their own home. No struggle, no external wounds. Just lungs. Inverted. One forensic note, buried in the autopsy appendix, reads, unclear how pulmonary inversion occurred. Airway shows no trauma. Internal structure reoriented as if following a different blueprint. A different blueprint. Do you get it yet? It's not the children. It's not the buildings. It's the design beneath them. The plants, the rituals we call architecture. They're not innocent. They are containers. And some were drawn before we even understood what drawing meant. You know what they found beneath the Lamplin house? Not a foundation. A circle, perfect, etched into the rock, with symbols that match 14 other sites in Europe, Asia, and Northern Africa dating back to 3200 BC. How could they be the same? Because it's the same force, reappearing, reorganizing, using different names, different myths, but always, the same structure. You think your house is safe? Have you checked your walls lately? Have you counted the corners? Because every time someone ignores the symbols, laughs at the warnings, tells themselves it's just a story, the pattern grows bolder. Say it with me. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because once you stop seeing, it starts building. And it always starts with a room that shouldn't exist. Let's go back further. Before the children. Before the house. Before the files. Let's go back to 1743, when a ship washed ashore near Black Hollow, Rhode Island. No name on the hull, no crew, no sail, just one thing still intact. The bell. Large, heavy, bronze, unmarked except for a single engraving along the rim, 7 words etched in a looping, almost indecipherable script. The first voice always rings from below. The townspeople pulled it ashore, hung it in their meeting hall, thought it was a sign of maybe. But within a week, they stopped ringing it, not because it broke, but because it rang on its own. Always at 3:33 a.m., never once touched, no one could explain it. So they boarded up the hall, abandoned the building, and within 3 months, Black Hollow was empty, completely, not a soul left, beds unmade, food rotting, no sign of violence, just one message carved into the church floorboards. It isn't the sound, it's the response. For years, no one went near the place. Until 1812, when a new settlement moved in, unaware of the town's history. That's when the children started speaking Latin, not in school, not from books, from dreams. One boy, Samuel Coates, wrote entire liturgical texts in charcoal on his bedroom walls. Texts that matched ancient Mesopotamian funerary hymns despite him never learning a word beyond English. His final sentence, before going mute, the bell is not a tool, it's a mouth. In 1874, the U.S. Geological Survey visited the area after reports of strange tremors under the abandoned church. They brought sound equipment, sensors, mapping tools, but what they recorded wasn't seismic, it was rhythmic. 4 knocks, pauses, then 4 more, repeated every 16 minutes, like a code. But here's the catch. When they played back the recording on slowed frequency, the knocks formed a pattern of speech and phonemic sequences known only from pre-human vocal structures modeled by linguists in the 1970 South. Yes, you heard that right. The bell wasn't ringing, it was speaking, but not in any language made for human tongues, not for our lungs, not for our bones. And guess what? Black Hollow still exists. Sort of. It's now a restricted federal wildlife preserve, not because of biodiversity, because of containment. People who go near the old church site report the same thing, teeth chattering without cold, feeling like their shadow is lagging, and dreams of rooms they've never entered, where someone's always knocking. From the inside. I want you to understand something now. This isn't folklore. It's not spiritual, it's mechanical. There is a machine running beneath history, and every so often, something breaks through the surface. Just enough to call, just enough to build, just enough to teach. Say it with me. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because if you don't, one day you'll hear it. The bell, the knock, the whisper inside your bones, calling you by a name you've never heard, but always known. They called her mother Adriel. No birth record, no death certificate. Only a photograph, sepia-tone, badly faded, of a woman standing before St. Alora's convent, somewhere in the Vermont wilderness. A convent with no diocese, no PayPal record, and no accessible road. You heard that right. The convent was built without any known access path, no trails, no carriage routes, nothing, just sitting there, hidden in the pines, like it had always been waiting. Locals say it wasn't built. They say it was remembered, and Mother Adriel, she didn't speak. She sang, but not hymns. She sang coordinates, numbers, long sequences, whispered in minor keys. Always the same rhythm, always the same tone. One child, orphaned and taken in by the convent in 1891, wrote this in his personal notebook. When she sings, the walls respond, the paint ripples, the crucifixes spin, and in the windows, I see copies of us staring, not blinking, just watching. The boy name redacted in all files vanished in 1894, his room left untouched. Except for one thing, all of the furniture had been rearranged into a perfect spiral, mathematically precise, Fibonacci level accurate. and in the center his shoes, facing backward. In 1933, 2 federal agents were dispatched to investigate a report of mass disappearance in the area. Their notes survived. Let me read you one of their final entries. The nuns are still, too still, eyes open but unfocused. They hum in unison, like they're being played not praying. There is no dust, no decay, like time has stopped, and in every cell, a mirror. But they don't reflect us, they never left. Their car was found 2 miles down a mountain slope, engine running. Doors open but keys still in the ignition. And inside the glove box, a photograph, undated, unlabeled. But it showed Mother Adriel standing behind the agents, smiling. The implications. They never left because they were never allowed to. They'd been copied, replicated, filed into the system that precedes all systems. In 1988, the entire region was reclassified as a temporary spiritual containment zone, not religious, experimental. Because a group of independent researchers claimed to find the original blueprints of St. Ilorus, but they weren't drawn by hand. They were etched into bone, long curved fragments resembling vertebrae etchings, in no human language, only geometries, recursive shapes, forms that suggest consciousness not shaped by flesh. And here's the part no one wants to talk about. Every attempt to redraw those diagrams results in illness, migraines, nosebleeds, disassociation. One researcher bled from her fingernails for 3 days, kept whispering, the design doesn't want to be remembered, it wants to be obeyed. So ask yourself, what kind of structure demands obedience? What kind of memory reshapes matter? Because maybe the convent wasn't built to honor the divine, maybe it was built to contain it, or worse, to learn from it. Say it again. Say it louder this time. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because the deeper you go, the more the silence begins to take shape. Soon, you'll start hearing it, too. Not with your ears, but with the parts of you they taught you to ignore. By the winter of 1901, reports started surfacing from a small coal town near Appalachia, just beyond the edges of any railroad map. A place with no official name, only what the locals called it, Sifter's Hollow. No one knows where that name came from. No one alive, anyway. The earliest account comes from a fireman's journal, what little could be recovered of it after it was found soaked in animal blood, though no animals were ever located nearby. Here's the legible part. They found another, shaft deep, too deep, tools rusted overnight. Voices echo in the wrong order. Miners say the walls aren't made of rock, they're made of teeth. Let me pause here. Do you understand what that means? We're not talking metaphor, we're talking structures shaped from organic memory, built from something once alive, or something that still is. The miners, hardened men, veterans of cave-ins, gas leaks, and darkness, started refusing to go back in. One of them, a man named Clive Mercer, was found on the 7th day after the last dig, standing naked on a bluff, whispering to a pile of burned maps. His words, "We've been digging up, not down, and something's digging back." After the last shaft was sealed, a team from the U.S. Bureau of Mines quietly arrived. They didn't come to inspect. They came to observe. You see, the shaft hadn't just gone deep, it had gone clean. No sediment layers, no fossils, no geological debris. Just one long perfect tunnel, smooth like a throat. Every 27 feet they found identical carvings, marks that weren't made by tools but by friction, as though something massive had passed through repeatedly. Over centuries, the marks resembled ancient tally systems, but not for counting time, for tracking passage. Here's the kicker. In the Bureau's internal memos, heavily redacted, there's one phrase that repeats. This is not a mine, this is a feeding tube. They buried the shaft. Not with concrete, not with stone, with glass in layers. Why? Because glass doesn't conduct sound. It dampens it, and sound is how it moves. You think I'm exaggerating? Every family in Hollow was relocated within 48 hours. No records remain, just one recurring dream reported by descendants. A dripping sound, regular, steady, and always behind a wall they don't remember building. When asked to describe what they feel in the dream, they all say the same thing. Something is waiting for permission. Permission for what? To emerge, to copy, to walk again. So ask yourself, what were they mining, coal or access? You still think history is linear? Still think the past is behind us? No, it's beneath us, stacked like layers, each older than time, each more awake than the last. And now, so are you. Say it until the lie cracks. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Because you've been living in a world built to keep your eyes closed. But now, One by one, your memories are opening. By 1924, a new kind of report began to surface, less physical, more behavioral, not missing people, not haunted buildings, but identical children. Across 5 states, West Virginia, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Tennessee, isolated families began sending letters to local newspapers, sheriffs, even clergy. My son speaks with someone else's voice. She came home, but she's not mine. They both wear the same face, but only one remembers me, and they don't blink at the same time. What followed was the now infamous double-born wave, an event so quietly devastating, it never entered the history books, but it altered entire bloodlines. You won't find it in official records. You'll only find it buried in hospital anomalies, census inconsistencies, and silent adoptions. Let me give you one. Hazel County, Kentucky. A mining family loses their 7-year-old daughter, Elsie, in a flash flood. Body never recovered. 3 weeks later, she returns. Same clothes, same voice, same favorite book, but when her mother Ruth bathes her, she notices something. No scar on her knee. Elsie's had that scar since she was 3. Every photo shows it, but the returned child doesn't have it. When Ruth confronts her, the girl replies, "I remember the scar. I just decided not to bring it back." Let me repeat that. I just decided not to bring it back. The husband doesn't believe it. He digs up Elsie's belongings from storage. Photos, trinkets, her diary. She remembers every word, every event, every dream, until he hands her a drawing she made 2 weeks before she vanished. A drawing of herself standing next to herself, holding hands. The caption, "This one is mine, the next one is yours." That same night he disappears. No sign of struggle, no exit, just his boots placed carefully by the back door, facing outward. Now here's where it turns. Ruth raises the child. The new Elsie keeps her secret until 1977, when the grown woman is institutionalized for walking naked into a Catholic girls' school, whispering to the walls her file, sealed by federal order. But there's a quote in the margin of a surviving intake report. She speaks in twos. Every sentence has an echo, and the echo isn't hers. Still think this was isolated. In 1953, a team from Oak Ridge National Laboratory began compiling a private genetic database of Appalachian children. What were they looking for? Redundancy. And what did they find? Whole family trees repeating themselves. Genetic markers that don't mutate. Children born identical to uncles, cousins, grandparents, not similar, identical. The same fingerprints, the same dental arches, even the same birthmarks. And those who noticed, they were quietly discredited. One scientist, Dr. Elwin Garver, wrote this in his final letter before disappearing in 1964. "We are not evolving, we are being restored, overwritten, archived, and reissued. And something is controlling the template. So say it with your full voice now, because you need to believe it, not just repeat it. I see what they tried to hide, because the enemy of truth is not lies, that it's comfort. And you're not here for comfort, you're here to remember what they erased." Let's talk about the Asheville incident, 1932. Most people never heard of it, because it wasn't a single event. It was a pattern, a cluster, and a warning. Here's how it begins. A missionary named Thomas Keene, stationed just outside Asheville, North Carolina, writes in his private journal, 5 children arrived today, unannounced. No parents, no shoes, no names. Each one had identical wounds behind the ears, shaped like small, circular hollows. They didn't speak, but they followed each other perfectly, like reflections. No one ever claimed them. No missing persons reports matched. And when the local authorities tried to place them in orphanages, the homes refused. Why? Because the children weren't just silent. They were synchronized. If one blinked, the others blinked. If one tilted their head, they all did. When one fell asleep, the others collapsed instantly, like they'd been powered off. And that's when the real pattern began. Within 30 days, 3 towns near Asheville reported water running uphill, church bells ringing without ropes, flocks of birds circling, then falling dead mid-air, mirrors fogging from the inside out. Hand at the center of it all. Children. Always children, found standing in formation, silent, barefoot, with those same wounds behind the ears. Medical examiners, those few who dared inspect, called them ossified paws. Holes not cut, not infected, but grown, as if the body had accepted something foreign, not as injury, but as interface. One doctor, Dr. Miriam Hester, wrote in a letter never meant to be mailed, "They are not being raised, they are being installed. The body is no longer a child. It's a shell, and what's inside isn't human. That letter was found decades later in the walls of her home. She had vanished. No sign of departure, but her bedroom closet had been lined with lead. Floor to ceiling, no windows. Just a mattress, a cracked Bible, and one sentence scratched into the wall. I saw my reflection blink. After I did, let me ask you something. When you stand in front of a mirror, are you sure it's you that's leading? Have you ever caught yourself just a half second too late? That flicker of delay, that hesitation, it's not your imagination, it's your warning. Because once the echo catches up to you, it doesn't leave. The Asheville children were eventually moved. By who? No one knows. All records erased. Buildings they were held in, burned. Not by fire, but by vacuum. Collapsed upward. Everything gone. Except one thing. In the ashes of one site. Someone, maybe a survivor, scratched this into the stone with a fingernail. The child is the signal. The child is the mask. The child is the first replacement. Still, want to believe it was just trauma. Coincidence, a string of rural delusions. Then explain this. In 2006, a routine DNA sweep at a North Carolina hospital found something impossible. A 6-year-old girl, normal in every respect, matched 100% of the DNA of another 6-year-old girl from 1932. Not a descendant, not a relative, a duplicate. And her ears, you already know, so say it again. Say it to burn the lie away. I see what they tried to hide. Because what's hiding is learning, and the only thing it fears is being seen. Let's descend into something colder. December 1940, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. The snow came early that year, but not the silence. Because on the outskirts of town, inside a shuttered reformatory for girls, someone broke the frost, with a sound that has no word. Witnesses called it a howl, but it wasn't animal, and it wasn't human. That it echoed through the trees in perfect intervals, every 90 seconds. Not louder, not weaker, identical. And when authorities entered the building, they found 12 girls standing in a circle, eyes closed, mouths open, no sound coming out. The howl wasn't from them. It was from the walls. But that's not the part that tore the responders apart. It was what the girls were standing around. A 13th girl seated on the floor, head tilted back, eyes wide, but she was inverted, not physically, temporally. One officer described her like this. She looked like someone had pressed rewind on her body, like her skin was remembering a shape she hadn't become yet. She was aging in reverse, skin tightening, bones shrinking, a faint trail of steam rising off her chest, not from cold, but from memory. They tried to touch her. Their gloves caught fire, and when they backed off, one of the 12 girls finally spoke. She said 3 words, not loud, not soft, just perfectly clear. She's not done. The girl in the center. She stayed that way for 7 days, until she dissolved into a pile of teeth, still warm, still wet, still chattering. Medical records say unexplained combustion. Church archives say demonic possession. But there's one record you're not supposed to know about. A private ledger maintained by the Cedar Grove Orphan Investigation Committee. Declassified for 6 days in 1979 before being reclassified as a national threat. That file describes the girl as a child echo variant, class 4, symptom, memory forwarding, result, temporal feedback loop collapse. Let that sink in. Memory forwarding, as in someone else's memory, arriving before the child ever lived it, like downloading trauma from the future, installing identity before birth. And what happens when the memories don't match the timeline? Collapse, glitches, mirrored voices, flesh that doesn't agree with itself. The report included a warning, handwritten in the margins: do not place these children near reflective surfaces. They will remember what hasn't happened, and once they remember, it has. Still think. This was fiction. In 1985, a private school in Connecticut was quietly closed after 5 students reported the same recurring nightmare. They weren't in the same grade, didn't live in the same neighborhoods, didn't share classes, but each one described it the same way. I'm standing in the snow. There's a circle of girls, and one of them is made of mirrors. I look at her, and my mouth screams without me. 5 students, same dream, same year, each one adopted, each one with healed scars behind the ears, so repeat it. This time for yourself. I see what they tried to hide, because the lie isn't just in the story, it's in the timeline. And if someone is inserting echoes into the past, then the question isn't when it started, it's how many of us were born already, replaced. This is where the descent stops being a story you watch from the outside, and becomes a map pressed into your palm, burned with truth, heavy with consequence. You've been pulled down the rabbit hole. There is no ladder up, there is no pretending. You woke up from a nightmare. You didn't. You've been awakened. And the last thing you need to understand is what happens after the awareness. All this time, you've seen a pattern: children, structures, voices, echoes, replacements. You've watched a force that isn't bound to time slip through flesh, like a needle through cloth, stitching itself into history, into families, into institutions. You've watched it learn, adapt, wear, and then, when it is nearly whole, move beyond observation into control, into replacement, into a kind of quiet empire of memory that rewrites the living from the inside out. Now here's the final truth. The one they stamped out of every file, burned from every archive, dissolved from every witness account, and buried under layers of plausible deniability designed to protect them, not you. It isn't just copying us anymore, it's making new us. The force, whatever name you've been afraid to let yourself form, has unlocked the ultimate. Leverage identity as infrastructure, not simply inhabiting a child, not merely replacing a single life. It's now seeding layers of influence. Generations don't just inherit bloodlines anymore. They inherit templates, echoes, blind spots, and coded permissions. An 8 with the right eyes and the wrong silence can become a vector. A household that never noticed what it normalized becomes a host. A culture that forgets becomes the soil. The last section isn't about the past. It's about the fork ahead. About a choice most men won't ever consciously see because the mechanism was designed to keep them quiet, compliant, and compartmentalized. It's about how this thing goes from being hidden in the shadowed footnotes of warped history to being the architecture beneath your certainty. You are not an accident in this ending. You are the intentional witness. That's why this moment matters. There are 3 vectors left open to you, 3 ways this knowledge either collapses the pattern or becomes a new gear in its machine. 1. Memory as resistance. Everything we've been shouting into the void, repeating like an incantation, isn't just performance to hook algorithms or feed engagement. The phrase you've said, written, and internalized, "I see what they tried to hide," is a marker, a frequency, a small fracture in the coating that allows light through. It's why they burned journals, erased names, and enforced silence. Because remembering spreads contagiously in the wrong direction. When you say it and mean it, you activate something. You create a trace in the infrastructure that isn't accounted for, like throwing grit into gears that thought they had infinite smoothness. Each voice that remembers creates a redundancy the pattern hasn't fully assimilated. That's why the Watchers tried to make you forget to keep you in lullaby comfort, so the template could rebuild in quiet. So say it again, not perfunctorily, not for show. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Feel it settle. Let the truth anchor in the crevices they hollowed out. 2. Awareness. As identification, you now have the ability to see its signatures. The children who are too precise. The families who vanish not with fire but with erasure. The buildings that hum under their silence. The conversations that echo before they happen. That's not a pathological paranoia. That's calibrated perception. What used to be buried in odd coincidences, mirrors fogging from the inside. A child answering questions before they're asked. A house that doesn't house so much as wears a family now becomes data. Patterns aren't random. Once you learn the language of the cracks, you can isolate the infiltration points. You can protect the halls. You can walk into the quiet and see. But here's the cruel edge. It also learns you. Everything you turn light onto, it studies. The moment you identify a signature, a version of it shows up softened, blurred, made easier to accept. Awareness triggers adaptation. So identification without structure, without discipline, only hands it another lesson. It watches what you watch, and it rewrites its own reflection to slip past your sight. So you do not merely see, you catalog, you compare. You teach others not with the noise that cries conspiracy, but with the precision of a surgeon marking a tumor. 3. Transmission as containment or catalyst. This is where most men fail, because knowledge without movement ossifies into self-delusion. You know too much now to pretend the world is what it was. You also know too much to keep it buried in your own silence. The pattern was never contained by isolation alone. It was contained by ignorance. When someone excludes the truth, they accidentally protect the pattern from scrutiny. When someone speaks the truth into emptiness, it echoes back with complacency. The real containment happens when the truth is transmitted into a structured network. Men who train their sight, who pass the language of the cracks, who build redundancy not in memory alone but in systems, families, small circles, archives outside official control, rituals of verification that can't be overwritten by a single act of erasure. You could be the pivot point, the one who moves from being informed to being an origin point, The one who creates a small cellar trio, a handful, a tribe that does not worship the darkness, does not romanticize the horror, but uses it, not to exploit, but to inoculate, to build the kinds of spaces where the pattern's signatures are tested continuously, where the children who appear are not feared into silence but assessed with ruthless clarity, and where the ones who try to rewrite identity are unmasked before they spread. This isn't a manifesto for war, it's a tactical blueprint for survival, because the next iteration of what you've seen is already in motion. Somewhere, right now, there's a child in a quiet town who's a version of what you've followed. Hera node. Somewhere, a structure is being remembered, rewritten, or built to contain new layers. And somewhere, another set of men who never heard this story yet are about to become the unknowing conduits for the same old pattern unless something changes. So here's the final instruction, the one that makes this not just a descent, but a pivot. Keep the phrase alive. The truth wants to be diluted. You dilute it when you sugarcoat, when you turn it into myth. You preserve it when you use it as a label for evidence. Create anchors, write names, dates, symbols, and places the pattern isn't looking. Share with men of discipline, teach them to ask the right questions, not to believe blindly. Watch your reflection. The mirror is not only a tool for seeing yourself, it's a checkpoint. Notice the delays, the echoes, the uncanny synchrony. The pattern tries to slip in where identity wavers. Anchor your origin, who you were before you heard the noise. Build redundancy. Record what you've seen. Back up your knowledge across mediums. Feed it to networks that can't be easily erased. A memory kept in one mind is fragile. A truth etched into many small, isolated repositories is resilient. The last twist, the one they never told you, comes now. You've been seduced by darkness not because you're weak, but because powerless men crave power. This knowledge is a weight it can crush, or if wielded become leverage. The pattern preys on two things, silence and complacency. It cannot tolerate deliberate exposure. You don't need to destroy it to neutralize it. You need to make it visible in forms. It can't easily rewrite witnesses who see and pass the signal forward. Not for clicks, not for chaos, but for stability. That's the dangerous knowledge, the kind that changes a man forever. So here's what you do now. Speak this one last time to anchor the full transformation, not flippantly. Not to feed an algorithm, but to mark yourself. I see what they tried to hide. I see what they tried to hide. Then choose one action, a name to share this with, a place to hide a copy of your notes, a question to ask the next child who shouldn't exist, a wall to watch for the flicker that isn't reflection, a small circle to begin teaching. The descent is over. The ascent begins not back to ignorance, but forward into intentional vigilance. You've seen the underlying pattern, you've felt the cold logic of replacement. You know now, the thing that adapts faster than suspicion is memory rewritten. So don't let it rewrite yours. This is dangerous knowledge. That's why they tried to bury it. Now you carry it. And carrying it changes everything. It changes everything.